I've decided to make this mini lecture also, small lecture also in English because it's about American affairs. So, because there is a much talk about who would be best substitute for Donald Trump as the Republican candidate for the next presidential elections in the United States. And well, there's usually Ron DeSantis is presented as the one who could be a replacement for Donald Trump if Donald Trump would be unwilling or unfit. I mean, as far as his health is concerned, he's after all already after his in his late 70s or in his mid 70s, really. So if Donald Trump would be incapable of running himself, then maybe Ron DeSantis would be a good replacement. And I am of a different opinion myself because I think personally because I think that the Glenn Youngkin, the guy who has won in the U.S. state of Virginia recently against McAuliffe, who was representing the Democrats, that he would be much better candidate, I think, to replace Trump if Trump will be unwilling or incapable of running himself again as the presidential candidate. So it seems that maybe Ron DeSantis is representing some big issue, but I beg to differ here because. Mm, there was much talk about the ill management of the COVID situation by Donald Trump that probably cost him an election. It cost him election because he was people were basically satisfied with his economics. Even people who politically criticized him and stood on the other side, they appreciated what Donald Trump has done for the economy, and now there is much capital to be gathered because of what Biden did to the economy, and because the situation changed to the worse, and the Americans would be probably welcoming a change to have a Republican president again. So uh, I think that if Donald Trump is unwilling to do so, to be a candidate again, because Donald Trump would be an obvious choice because he is good with economics. That's for one thing, and the other thing is that Professor Victor Davis Hanson, who is the leading Republican intellectual lately, the professor of history and war, um, he. Pointed out that Trump is representing something that can be seen also in General George Patton, for instance, or in Churchill to a lesser extent, maybe. That there is some special kind mm, of perspective on special kind um, of philosophy in life to look at the people's things, the people's affairs, at history, at politics in some way, in some somewhat tragic way. That means that people are maybe not naturally as good as we would like to think, and maybe we should be prepared not only to be governed by the but good and just laws as the proponents of enlightenment proposed. For instance, Thomas Jefferson would he pointed out that it would be a great idea to be governed only by laws, by philosophy, not by philosophy, by laws, by good laws, not by other people. To so to move as far as it possibly as it's possibly as one possibly can from the tyranny, dictatorship, and so on, by securing the situation in which we would be governed only by laws. But it is possible that it's possible that even that people are not as good as one would think, and because of that, you must have good philosophy, you must have good laws, you must have good cause, but you also need strength, and you also need to show teeth from time to time to deal with fascism, communism, and so on. And sometimes people like Donald Trump, like George S. Patton, like Winston Churchill, they were perceived as warmongers because they were psychically ready to deal with Hitler, to deal with Stalin, to deal with mass immigration, which also means, for instance, drug trafficking and crime organizations and so on. So they show this readiness to deal with the problem, to deal with how much evil there's in the world, and it could be misconstrued as some kind of warmongering, that they are maybe too similar to this state of mind in which the dictators and the criminals are, or something like that. There is this snowflakish way of thinking that is interpreting this situation as we interpreting is this situation as if George Patton or Trump were too similar to dictators, or to but merely they were but they were merely trying to deal with the evil that is in the world. So no problem here, I think, right? It's a good thing, not a bad thing. So I fear that Ron DeSantis do not possess this quality, do not possess this tragic outlook on people's affairs and the history of mankind, and because of that could be not capable of resisting against the domination in democratic and the leftist domination in media and so on, and it could be problematic for him as a presidential candidate for the Republicans. So I think that Glenn Youngkin, the guy who has recently won against McAuliffe, who was representing the Democrats, Glenn Youngkin won, and Glenn Youngkin was representing the Republicans in the purple state of Virginia. Virginia is maybe not a swing state; it's not even a swing state. It's a Democratic dominated state. It is so for many decades now, and Glenn Youngkin scored a good result in this Democratic dominated state, and that's something worth observing, I think. And so what's the difference between Ron DeSantis and Glenn Youngkin? Glenn Youngkin has attacked the sacrosanctum of the left. He has attacked the critical race theory, that is basically and why it resulted in such an outcome. It can be very easily explained because there was a online learning, and the parents in many households were able for the first time to observe what exactly is taught to the children in the schools, and they observed that there is that much of the school program is really a leftist propaganda that is portraying US history as something which is inherently bad and full of exploitation and so on. No one ever said that US history is something that only get good cards and good good pages and noble causes, but to portray the history of the United States something which is inherently bad and always morally wrong, it's damaging to children, I think. Yes, and parents were able to see it for the first time. So that gave the deciding drive to the campaign of Glenn Youngkin. And what gave it to Ron DeSantis, it was the COVID situation and the regulations. Then the economical regulations was first and foremost his opposition, Ron DeSantis in Florida, his opposition to COVID regulations. And one would think that maybe it's the deciding factor for the Republicans now to point out why the COVID regulations, which are imposed by the Democrats in most of the states and on the federal level by the Biden administration, if Biden really rules the country, because sometimes Biden contradicts what at one press conference what he said at the previous press conference. It's almost as if someone is correcting him. So but still, it's a Democrat-run administration. So on the federal level and in most of the states, there are very strict anti-COVID regulations, and Ron DeSantis is taking another path, and maybe it could be deciding factor because it is believed that Donald Trump also lost because he was not on one page with the majority of U.S. population as far as COVID is concerned, because he was not taking the situation seriously. Yes, he has provided the opportunity to produce vaccines earlier. He has done some technological things to provide the vaccines, and that's laudable. But he also was not psychically on the same page as the majority of the U.S. population. He was not emotionally. He was not treating. He was not taking the COVID situation serious enough. So he lost, and now could be an impression. And there is an impression among the Republicans and among the commentators both in the United States and Europe that maybe it could be the deciding factor for the Republicans for the next election to point out why the over regulation of the COVID pandemic is the cause that will provide the winning for the next election. And I very much doubt it, because in a couple of years, because I get it that some people, for instance, they are already sick and tired with the over-regulated Californian government. For instance, they are moving to Ron DeSantis and his Florida. I get it, but I think that it will not be a deciding factor because it's not the main cause. The main cause would be For instance, when you look at Dave Rubin, for instance, Dave Rubin, he was basically a progressive liberal all his life, but when the left went crazy, he has decided to be, when he was he had to make a choice if he will be continued as a classical liberal or the lefty, because the progressive liberals are basically extinct by this point. And then because the whole political spectrum moved very hard to the left, then he decided to be a classical liberal and he accepted the situation in which the left in the world today went crazy, and the new center is, and what the right is saying is the new center, really. So, so he moved to the right, and he also is physically moving. He has announced it lately. He's physically moving with his organization, Dave Rubin. I mean, he's moving to Florida, to Ron DeSantis state. And I know that it's a very powerful message, and I know this is an emotional thing for the Americans, but I still think that what Glenn Youngkin was fighting for and what he was fighting against, that will be more deciding, because in the next few years, COVID will probably stick around forever, and we will be more or less immune to it, to some extent immune, to some extent not immune at all. and this will basically stay with us, and it will not be an ideological factor you can base the entire campaign on. And what Glenn Youngkin was fighting for, and what he was fighting against, I mean the ideological war that is put into the young minds in schools when the parents are not watching. This is something that can really turn the tables and then can really change the situation. And Glenn Youngkin has won in a state which was basically a Democrat state, a basically left-wing state. Not even a swing state, but a left-wing state for many decades now. Because after the Civil War, Virginia was divided into two parts, and West Virginia was, from that moment on, totally different politically than the coastal Virginia, the Virginia itself, which was now only the rump of the state, of the previous state, because Virginia was to be punished for being the center of the old days Confederacy. And Virginia, the coastal Virginia, the Virginia without the adjective West, was to become a progressive state, a left-wing state, more or less. So scoring a good result in Virginia by Glenn Youngkin, that's really something that means a lot. And I think also that Glenn Youngkin possesses more of this tragic outlook on the human affairs and the history of mankind, which is closer to Churchill and Patton and Trump. And that Ron DeSantis is basically on the brink of desperation, and it could be seen when he's saying about the left-leaning politics in the United States. So that's problematic for Ron DeSantis, and Glenn Youngkin has on his hands a much better tool, because he is basically going totally against what the left is saying, and this is the ideological war, not the medical war, because the medical situation can change rapidly, and you cannot base a campaign on it itself, only on this. Because Trump lost, yes, because what he did with COVID, or maybe did not make with COVID, yes, but you must observe that after his lost campaign, the situation, the global situation as far as COVID is concerned, changed so much that no other government fell in the world because of COVID. For instance, there was enough to make a small adjustments for instance, for Boris Johnson to be able to save his power and influence. So COVID is not a deciding factor to win or lose elections, basically, although the fate of Donald Trump could suggest otherwise. So Ron DeSantis, who is governing the Florida, and Florida was very often, it was also very close very often, who will win in Florida, for instance, Gore versus Bush, and Bush won with a few votes, really. But now Florida is moving. Florida is very special because it has many Latinos, but those Latinos are in this day and age, the Latinos are more and more pro-Trump, because they are the legal immigrants are against illegal immigration, and the Republican Party is no more a party of wasps or something like this. So this. There is not so much distance between the Latinos and the Republican Party as it used to be. And Florida is also special because the Floridian Latinos are in a very huge proportion Cubanos and Cubans and Cubans. So, and Cubans are very, very much right wing, because they are basically people that escaped from Fidel Castro. So they are the base of the Republican support. in Florida. So I just want to say that what Glenn Youngkin did in Virginia is far more spectacular than what Ron DeSantis did in Florida. Then Glenn Youngkin is better psychically prepared for the media, for the lefty media storm if he will be nominated as the Republican candidate. Then Roy DeSantis would be in the same situation. And I think it would be better to go with Youngkin. And he's also a person who has scored a good result in the enemy's territory, just like Bill Clinton in Arkansas, for instance, right? So it's mucho gusto, señor, gracias, and viva Mexico. And so I think Glenn Youngkin would be a far better candidate in all in all. And then his cause, he's fighting against the critical race theory. It would be something much more constructive to go with for the Republican Party, something that would last much longer. And this, because what Trump did was to attack the core of the pro-immigrant ideology of the left, and now Glenn Youngkin did precisely the same. He attacked this racial element of the Democrat ideology. And Ron DeSantis, he only attacked regulations. So his cause is not as eternal, as noble cause as the cause of Youngkin or Trump. So it seems so, at least. And that the COVID, the political program, the political campaign based only on the approach to COVID pandemic, it would not secure, in my opinion, a good result just by itself. It's far better to attack the opponent ideologically, and what Trump did and what Glenn Youngkin did.